Ladies and gentlemen, SideStrafe here, taking a very special look at the Live Gamer Portable from Avermedia. And as you can see, this is an external device that's going to allow you to capture or live stream high-quality gameplay footage on PC or console system. Very nice design, really small, actually less than the length of my hand, which means that it does live up to that portable name. So it's going to be great for those of you on the go or perhaps even looking for a laptop solution. But as I'm about to discuss, it makes for a excellent desktop video capture device as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at some specifications before we get to the gameplay footage. So as you can see, this is a fairly capable device. It has everything that I need to maintain my set of standards. There's one downside, of course, and that's in regards to audio. It only manages to capture HDMI and 3.5mm sources. It will not capture a USB source, and that's unfortunate because I've got a really nice headset by Logitech, the G930 wireless, which has amazing sound, surprisingly good sound for a USB device, and it will not record from that. I actually have to go into Windows settings and route my HDMI audio back through the USB, which works, but I do have some issues with it. It's not perfect. I don't get to utilize all the features of my headset when I'm doing that, and it's a complaint I've had for some time, dating back to the original Live Gamer capture card. Avermedia at that time had said that they would work on a solution, but it never came, and here we are at a new device, still no USB audio support, and from what I know, they aren't looking at doing it anytime soon, but it is still something they may look at. But as far as I can tell, this isn't the only capture card that has that problem. All of their competition also does not support USB, and it just seems to be a thing where not that many people are using a USB audio source, and that's completely understandable, but considering the quality that I do get out of that headset, it is unfortunate, but not a reason to not use this device. Let's move on. Resolution for input, 1920 by 1080p at 60 frames. We're going to have our encoder at 1920 by 1080p at 30 frames. So that means you're going to be able to play your games at whatever frame rate you like, 60, 100, and beyond if possible. And then you're going to get a file that's 1920 by 1080p at 30 frames. So you'll enjoy your games, full frame rate, no drops because the hardware is doing the encoding on the fly, but then you're going to end up with something that's only 30. That's not really a problem because YouTube only supports 30 anyway. It's for the most part an industry standard. If they choose to upgrade one day, well, hopefully we'll see hardware that does the same, but this is something that's across the board, not just with the Live Gamer, but as well their competition. You're also going to get a bitrate of 60 megabits per second, which is phenomenal. Of course, beating the competition in that department, whereas they only support 30 to 13 in some examples, or even worse when you're looking at a few other brands. But that's really good. The quality you're going to get on the final file is exquisite. The only thing is that YouTube, once it gets its claws on it, is going to bring that down a bit just because YouTube's compression standards aren't really that great. Encoding latency around 300 milliseconds, OS support 7 and 8 for Windows, and then you've got a PC-free record to SD card option, which is actually fairly unique. I don't think I've seen another device at this price point that has this feature. It basically allows you to insert an SD card, class 10, mind you, make sure it's class 10, and then record from a system without the need of another machine, and just go straight to that SD card. You have to keep in mind that you're only going to get 720p footage when you're doing this. You can't get 1080, but it is a nice feature, and I'm thinking that the bitrate might not be as great either, but hey, it's an extra option. They didn't have to do it, but they did. I don't really think it would have affected the price too much had it not been there, just because I've looked at the price of their normal PCI Express capture card as well, and it was similar at the time of release. So not bad to add that feature on there for somebody who perhaps is at a convention doing an interview and wants to just grab some footage if the developer or publisher allows it. Cool that that's there. The size, dimensions, if you're interested in that, simply USB powered, and then it's got a onboard hot button and light indicator. Basically, that button, that circular button in the center there, you press that, it's going to light up, pulsate, let you know when you're recording. So now that we've looked at the specs, let's get to gameplay footage captured by the Live Gamer Portable. So for the purpose of this review, I decided to go ahead and record a few different games because I feel that each engine provides a different result. For example, we've got ArmA 3 Alpha here, and this is a more gritty, true-to-life, photorealistic game. And I find that when you have an engine that is a bit darker or natural in color, you see a bit more compression when you have a lot of motion, as opposed to a game like World of Warcraft or Star Wars The Old Republic, more cartoony, vibrant, or bright colored games. You end up hiding some of that compression within the brightness. You can also think of an example where somebody might be filming something in a snowy environment, perhaps a snowboarding video, where it's so bright that a lot of the compression is hidden, and you have a video that actually looks really, really good on YouTube, but it's mostly just because of that brightness and those light colors. So here with ArmA 3 Alpha, this is a great example, as it is very demanding on your system specs, very CPU intensive, especially when you're looking at the draw distance. So with that said, when you're using a software solution like Fraps or DxStory, you're going to take a major frame rate hit unless you have some sort of monster CPU, perhaps even overclocked, or even lots of RAM and a great GPU with an amazing hard drive setup. It's really hard to avoid, and I have a pretty decent system for this. It's definitely going to depend on the game. ArmA 3 is very taxing once I hit Fraps, especially in a multiplayer environment. I may have 60 frames per second in a single player situation, or when I'm just running around an empty map, but then when I enter a multiplayer scenario, my frame rate drops substantially, and then when I turn on Fraps, I'm ending up with less than 30 frames, maybe even in the 20s at some cases, and it's just unacceptable. I can't enjoy my game like that. I can't perform. I can't help the team out, and on top of that, my hard drive is filling up with these monster sized files. Now, with the Live Gamer HD PCI Express capture card or the Live Gamer Portable, which we're using here, the performance hit doesn't exist. You're going to get full frame rate. If you can get 60, if you can get above 60 frames per second without VSync turned on, you're going to enjoy that. Because if there's a hit with this device, I can't detect it. It is flawless in that regard. Now, yes, you are trading quality. You are able to record at 60 megabits per second, which this is, and it is pretty darn close to some of those software solutions, but it's not perfect. It's not going to be as great as something that's giving you near raw video quality. But honestly, I'm extremely picky, and I can tell you today that this is very much so acceptable, even to my high standards. I think that I would rather have this quality and this performance than be able to deal with, or I should say, then have to deal with a low frame rate and gigantic file sizes. So with that said, we can talk a little bit about the file size, especially using the ArmA 3 Alpha as an example. I was able to record 5 minutes with Fraps and 5 minutes with the Live Gamer Portable. When I used Fraps, my file ended up at 29.4 gigabytes. When I used the Live Gamer Portable, I ended up with 2.14 gigabytes. That's 29.4 with Fraps, 2.14 with the Live Gamer Portable. And looking at this quality, you tell me which you would rather deal with. Phenomenal. To get that is just a miracle in itself. And quite frankly, I have a 2 terabyte hard drive, and it was able to sustain what I was doing with Fraps. But, you know, let's say I wanted to record for hours on end. You got to be careful. And the more demanding the game, the more movement you have, the larger your files end up. That's just an example using ArmA 3. If you're at a lower resolution or playing a game that doesn't have as much motion, perhaps a game like XCOM, you might end up with a smaller file size. But you know, this is just fantastic. 5 minutes, 2.14 gigabytes, you know, give or take, depending on what you're doing. Do the math on that. You can record for hours. And let's face it, most people that are playing ArmA 2, ArmA 3, whatever, they're playing for hours. A lot of the missions or operations that clans are pulling off end up being over an hour. And not everybody's going to have a super large, fast hard drive to save their files to. And Fraps or DxStory might not be the best solution for you. Perhaps you're doing a World of Warcraft raid or something that's going to last 4 hours plus, and you want to record all of it. Well, Fraps, again, might not be the best idea, especially if you want maximum quality. So, you know, these are benefits, especially in a high-end game such as ArmA 3. Crysis 3 is probably another example. But from here, what we're going to do is actually move into another game. We're going to take a look at World of Tanks. So this title is one that isn't really photorealistic, but it's also not cartoony. It's somewhere in between, so I find that it is a perfect example of what the Live Gamer Portable is capable of. You can also pay attention to the sharp details in regards to the icons and text, the mini-map perhaps, focus on that and see what it looks like at 1080p, comparing it to, of course, Fraps or DxStory footage as well. There's a lot of details on the tanks. You'll find that the models within this title are very high poly, which is a good thing to look at when you are comparing footage through either hardware or software solution. But you'll see a little bit more compression once the tank enters full speed, and you have a lot of smoke kicking up in the back, and that also causes a lot of degradation in quality, I find. So more so maybe noticeable in this game because you're always seeing that smoke from the back of your tank, whereas you might be playing a shooter and there's not smoke, you know, every couple of seconds, unless you're running into smoke bombs or grenades and things like that. But here you can see how their color palette works with the title. I find that it is a bit softer than what I would get in Fraps. I'm going to get something a bit sharper in terms of all-over quality. I think it's because World of Tanks is generally a very sharp game. There's not a lot of motion blurring or effects that seem to take away from that fact. Everything is very sharp and straight, and you know, when you're dealing with geometry in vehicles, I think it's a little bit more noticeable. And the game is a bit slower paced, so I think you can kind of pay attention to softness when you're dealing with the Live Gamer Portable. But as you'll notice in this game, it has a frame rate counter top left. You can see that that is a very acceptable frame rate to get, especially considering that all my details are fully maxed out in the game. If I was using Fraps, I would drop that frame rate to 30 or maybe even a little less at times, depending on what's going on with all the action, smoke, and debris. And 30 frames, you can play it, but when it comes down to a heavy firefight or a close quarter, you know, heart-pounding engagement, it's just not acceptable. And I need my full frame rate to really enjoy these titles. And again, if you're looking at this quality and thinking that it's bad, I don't know what planet you're on, but I think it's amazing. And to be able to maintain my natural frame rate, totally a winner. Another reason for me to want to use this Live Gamer Portable. I think it's exquisite and actually a lifesaver, because quite frankly, when you're doing this, you know, as a profession or as your job, you come into a game, you got to do your commentary. You want to still kind of be able to enjoy yourself. And when my frame rate is tanking, no pun intended, it's not that enjoyable. And I really want to be able to perform at my best, helping myself as well as the team. So again, the Live Gamer Portable does a phenomenal job here, and I think this is a great example. So once again, you'll notice it a little bit more once we pick up full speed. This tank is actually only capable of doing 40 kilometers, so it's perhaps not the best to show off speed, but we'll see a little bit more when we look at War Thunder, as that is a flight simulator and a lot faster paced. But here again, it's just going to be about looking at the smoke, paying attention to perhaps the detail within the trees, the shadows, and the way they use lighting effects and whatnot. The heads-up display as well is a good example. Just being able to read the text and look at all the lines, the curves, and geometry within the models. I think, again, perfect example. So moving on from this, we're actually going to take a look at Star Wars: The Old Republic. Now, this title is obviously a lot more cartoony, more colorful, vibrant, rich worlds and character models. And it may not be the most detailed of games in terms of poly count or texture resolution, but it does a good job of showing you that the bright colors can actually kind of hide a lot of the compression that you'll see within typical YouTube gaming. So here, the weapons fire, the text popping up, the mini-map are all things to look at. Your icons within the user interface will also give you an idea of how sharp Live Gamer Portable actually can be. Of course, this is once again at 60 megabits per second, as is everything that I'm showing you here, but a very different example coming from looking at ArmA 3 and World of Tanks, and I think it does a fine job. This is probably some of the better footage that I tend to get within my commentaries because the game is just so cartoony in its style that it just hides a lot of those effects, and I don't end up with that muddy water. But we're going to run into a dialogue here with some other characters, and this is a good example of the close-up quality you're going to get. You enter this conversation mode, which of course has the depth of field, the background's blurred out, more focus and attention to the characters. You can probably say that this looks phenomenal, mostly because there's not a lot of motion. If you have a still image, something that moves very, very slow on YouTube, it's going to look fantastic. And the native file or the raw file looks great as well, even better. But here, the only movement you have is lips, little body motions, hand gestures, and it looks fantastic. But again, that's what you're going to get when you don't have a lot going on. Same could probably be said for the dialogue within a game like Mass Effect or Dragon Age Origins. You'll end up with a good result either way, just because we're so close up, looking at extreme details, and there's just not much going on. So this is a good example of that. Let's cut this one short and look at Call of Duty Black Ops 2. So what kind of capture card review would this be if I didn't include footage of a Call of Duty title? Let's face it, this is one of the most recorded games on the planet. And I will say that Treyarch has done a phenomenal job working with this engine. It's very old, and they've managed to get it to look pretty nice. It's not an ugly game by any means. The worst thing about it is probably the lack of scale and the texture resolution, but otherwise it's very sharp. 4x TXAA enabled, everything else jacked up 100%. It doesn't look so bad, and the Live Gamer Portable loves it. I'm sure a software solution will do just as well. However, we are maintaining performance. Not really hard to do in this game because it doesn't take that much to run, but generally fantastic being able to maintain your accurate frame rate with a hardware capture device. Now, one thing you might be noticing here, perhaps you are, perhaps you're not, is that this footage is lacking any form of screen tearing. That's because I've got V-Sync or vertical synchronization enabled, whereas in my other videos, and even the one following this, I don't have it enabled. Generally, I don't like using vertical sync because it's going to limit me or cap me at 60 frames per second, and in some cases, if you're below that frame rate anyway, you might end up having an adverse effect. But in Call of Duty, of course, you can get away with it because the game is running well over 60 anyway, so it's not really that much of a problem. I still get a smooth gameplay experience, and now I can have that without any tearing. So you might be thinking, well, when I use Fraps or DX Story, I don't record screen tearing. It's there, my eyes see it, but it doesn't end up in my video. That's just the way a software solution works. If you were to Alt-Tab the game, they wouldn't record the Alt-Tab. They wouldn't show your desktop. You would just still be recording the game. Whereas with the capture card, if I Alt-Tab this, you will then also capture my desktop. So whether you see that as an advantage or a disadvantage, that's up to you. If you have a game that likes to Alt-Tab itself for some strange reason, usually a weird bug of some sort, you know, having the software solution not capture that while you're in the middle of a commentary can be nice. But at the end of the day, I would rather have the performance and quality ratio that the Live Gamer Portable provides. So as you can see here, a decent amount of movement. This is just a game set up with some bots. I didn't feel like getting into a real match where I just get my face shot off. And I thought that I just wanted to show you, the quality of the Live Gamer Portable. So it wasn't necessary for me to get into any type of hardcore play. You know, I'm not moving full motion. Most people are probably going to be running around full speed. But again, I think that with this map specifically, it's a little brighter, lighter color. It looks very good and hides a lot of that compression. You know, at most you might see some of it around the muzzle flare or smoke that you get from hand grenades and whatnot. But generally, Live Gamer Portable does very well with this game. You can see it's very smooth, zero screen tearing with VSync turned on. I don't know that I would really want to run VSync any other time. It depends on the game. I don't mind running it that much here, but in a title like ArmA 3, that could be crippling to my performance and generally not a great idea. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at our final game, which is going to be War Thunder. Now this title is a brilliant 50-50 split. We've got the bright light colors of the sky and the dark gritty theme of the earth here. Diving in, we can probably get a little bit more compression effect, and then when we come back out, we'll lose a bit more with the bright. We've got the sunset in the background. Simply gorgeous game, amazing draw distance. I wanted to let you soak in the beauty of this title and remove the user interface. This is, of course, from a replay, which allows us to do that. So no, this isn't some sort of crazy hardcore mode. And even if it was, I probably wouldn't want to play like that. But we've got the frame rate counter up at the top left. You can see that we're typically getting well over 100 frames per second. That's thanks to the fact that the Live Gamer Portable is encoding your files H.264 on the fly. And you're going to also have the choice of MP4 or TS format. We'll get into why that might be of a concern to you a little later. But paying attention to here, you've got that insane sensation of speed and motion. You've got those crazy particle effects, tracer fire, smoke, and debris coming off the plane. Gives you a great thing to pay attention to for comparison against your software solution. You can also look at the plane, see all the detail, the bullet holes in the wing. You can see that it's all captured at 60 megabits per second at 1080p, 30 frames. It looks fantastic on the LGP. Loving it. But our plane seems to be in trouble. We're going to go down here and get another effect. Great comparison here. Let's see that. Fireball. There it is. Still looking good, if I do say so myself. But moving right along. We're in a new plane, a little bit darker, so you might see a bit more compression on it from the top side at least. It's painted that way, of course, so that if your enemy is above you, it's just seeing you blend into the terrain, and then you've got the sky color on the bottom. Makes sense, right? Anyways, moving right along. So, as we finalize with this final gameplay footage here, going into my conclusion of the Live Gamer Portable, I own also their previous product, which is the Live Gamer HD. It was a PCI Express card that has to be installed within your computer. Now, I thought it was going to be a miracle device. I wanted it to work so well, but unfortunately, I was plagued by audio sync issues in both formats that it recorded in MP4 as well as TS, which was released later as a solution of sorts. Now, these problems only happen within Adobe Premiere Pro, CS5 and earlier, of course, as well as CS6, even if you use the TS format. These problems don't happen within Sony Vegas, and I think it's just because the softwares handle footage differently. Premiere seems to be a bit more picky, and that's unfortunate. I had no desire to switch my editing programs. I wasn't going to do it. Just not happening. I've learned Premiere Pro too well, and it was just unacceptable to me that I would have to change. I tried every trick in the book. We dealt with support. We've updated drivers and software. There's just no solutions. I worked on this problem with a good friend of mine, and we couldn't figure anything out. We had to wait for the Live Gamer Portable, which does not have these same issues when you're using the Video TS mode. So, if you are an Adobe Premiere Pro user, you have to have CS6, and you have to record in the Video TS mode. There's no disadvantage to using TS other than the fact that the files are a bit heavier. You might find that your scrubbing isn't as smooth compared to MP4 format, but generally not that big of an issue considering the advantages you get by using the Live Gamer Portable. It would seem that this device just has more horsepower under the hood. It seems to have faster hardware compared to the Live Gamer HD. Avermedia hasn't commented on that. They haven't told us that it's more powerful, at least not publicly. It's just an assumption of mine because I no longer have these sync issues, so I think that the device is just able to keep up with your footage here, or at least in a way that Premiere appreciates it, because like I said, I never ran into those issues when using Sony Vegas. So with that said, I've actually been using this device to record my past few videos, and nobody within my community has actually noticed any change or degradation of quality, which gives me further evidence that this product deserves the 100% SideStrafe seal of approval. I can't recommend it enough. It's a little pricey, $179.99, but if you're doing what I do for a living, or you just record footage a lot, you want that performance, you want that hard drive space back, brilliant product. I can't recommend it enough. As long as it continues to work and receive support from Avermedia, I'm all over it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you on the next one.